God damn it. Well, I'm not cutting that out.
Why? Damn, I thought it was such a good entrance.
Alright, welcome to RPCR episode 4. Penis.
Well, we do try.
Yeah, we do. As I hope I don't have to keep reiterating to you, I'm Renovated and this is Helios.
You choose to keep doing it, though. I don't think any of them ever ask.
Well, neither do the people in my basement, but I don't care.
Anyways, so what were we talking about this week? Or today? Or yesterday? Or...
Well, yesterday we were talking about... Well, do you mean like last podcast or just like in general?
I was just saying what we were talking about for this one.
Oh, well, I was going to start this off talking about the new discovery we have made. What are you doing?
I was just moving things.
Well, here, let's just do it like this. Boom. Now it gets the equal amount of noise for each of us. I hope they can. I mean, that's
it. Alright, so we were talking...
I keep getting complaints, by the way, from you in the library. How you just...
Listen, it's a library. You're supposed to talk quiet. Everyone's like, oh, you gotta talk a little louder. I'm like, no, it's a library. You talk quiet at one.
Well, I mean, depends what kind of library.
You know what library you're at. It's the type you talk quietly at.
I mean, not all of them.
Anyways, we were talking about the engineering and architecture.
We were. Yes, we were. At lunch we were. I was talking about how, like, yeah.
He still likes Gothic.
I do. I believe it could be reincorporated.
I think at some parts, like, it makes sense to use Gothic arches instead of, normal arches on buildings because they're more effective. And that's only because it's a different keystone.
Yeah. I mean, aesthetically, I think it could work on skyscrapers.
See, I mean, I like what the Gothic style looks like, but I don't know if I want us to go back to that. That's kind of a depressing era, don't you think?
Well, it was, but it was also like an Enlightenment era. Like, it depends what part of the era.
Very depressing Enlightenment, if you ask me.
Well, what part of the era are we talking about? Are we talking about,
I'm just talking about, like, what their architecture looks like. It's really, in a lot of cases, it's imposing. It's, like,
well, it is, but it's
dark.
also...
They use, like, marble a lot.
Well, yes, they do.
And not, like, the nice white marble. Like the black marble.
Yes.
Where it's like, this is an imposing structure. Time to get the Spanish Inquisition.
It was all the idea of the time. It's like... One of the phases of Gothic, of course, came around during the exiting age of the Black Death. And you know how people felt during that. You know, it was a big obsession with death.
They were pissed at the younger ones who had less teeth than them.
Yes.
Isn't that upsetting? What came about after the plague? Oh, our children started to have less teeth. Why are you stuck up on that? not the 60% of people who died?
Granted, depending on how you look at it, the Black Death could be a good thing. Because one of the issues that was being faced during that time was overpopulation, believe it or not.
I would say it was more of sanitation.
Well, but the farms were reaching their carrying capacity. The amount of land that could be farmed, had pretty much been reached. Not many people could afford to buy more, and so they were running out of food for the mass population that they had.
To be fair, that was also, before the agricultural revolution.
That is true.
Now we have many more people than we did back then. And we're totally fine on food.
We are. Yeah, you were talking about, like a while ago, how you could fit the entire world's population if you put it in, like, the square footage of New York into, like, the state of Ohio.
Yeah, well, so imagine the population density of New York, which, yeah, admittedly it's kind of big, but it's still manageable.
Yeah.
You could fit the entire world's population at that density into the state of, I think it was Utah.
I think so. Yeah.
I think it was Utah. And they said that if you pretty much took, it wasn't the Sahara Desert, but it was part of the Sahara Desert, and you just made it straight solar panels, we would have enough power to power the entire world every day and have excess to get us through the night, obviously.
Yes.
So when people say, oh, the world's overpopulated, I'm like, you clearly have never been to the middle of any country. It really isn't.
Yeah.
We're really fine. 7 billion people on this planet is not a lot of people.
No, definitely not. And people like, even when they hear that, they're always skeptical, but they never realize how small New York really is compared to the rest of the state.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if you look on the map, you see that tiny island that looks long. It's still smaller than Rhode Island.
Yeah.
That's New York City.
Yeah.
It's a little bit bigger than that because
I have met people who actually think the state itself is the city.
no, people think that Rhode Island is part of New York. They don't think it's the city. They said, "Oh, isn't that part of New York?" Because they remember Long Island, and they hear Rhode Island, and they connect the two, and they're like, "That's New York, right?" No,
Really
nobody.
isn't.
It's not. But I think eventually it's inevitable that most of this planet will eventually become more city-like.
Oh yeah. Well, to what extent though? Are we talking like Coruscant levels or
Or terrace levels. Could you imagine that?
Terrace?
It was a planet in the Old Republic era. Pretty much imagine a city on top of a city, circling an entire Earth-sized planet.
That's what Coruscant is. Just 2,000 city layers.
No. The planet itself is a complete city. Then there's a city below that city, and then you reach solid ground.
I'm pretty sure that's what Coruscant is.
No, Coruscant still has open places. Like,
Well, yeah, it has those giant holes.
well, no. Like they still have like places that are sort of like still forests. Like they're man-made forests, but it's like then you get to like terrace, and there is none of that. It is straight city.
I forget, was that the planet destroyed by Starkiller Base? Like one of them? Because I remember them not using Coruscant as the New Republic's capital.
Shoot. So I only know this from Coder, Knights of the Old Republic, not the online version.
Not the shit version.
The single player one, and pretty much what happens is he gets bombed to death by Malik's ships, his armada.
So what, he like glasses the planet from orbit?
Sort of. It's not really glasses. He just blows it up. He doesn't completely blow it up, and now it's just a desolate wasteland.
I know we were supposed to talk about like the new discovery in space we made recently, but Star Wars is just too damn fun. In lore, right? In the canon, I think they're bringing the Yuzong Fong back.
The Yusong Feng?
Yes.
What was that again?
After the destruction of the Empire, like a race from a completely different galaxy that destroyed theirs, like comes to the Star Wars galaxy.
Oh, I'm not sure. I never really read those books.
Ah.
But I also remember, because this is back to the city kind of thing that we were talking about, I hate New York City subways, and Boston's especially.
Oh, they're awful.
Like, I think they look like garbage. They don't need to look like garbage. And I was telling people this, and I'm like, no, they need to look like garbage. I'm like, there's no reason for them to look like garbage. I don't want to be afraid whenever I go underneath the ground to go catch a train to go to 3 blocks down the street.
Yeah, I remember you talking, like, aesthetically they could be so much better.
They could look aesthetically more pleasing. And I'm not talking about, like, the tunnels where it's all dark and all that and you can't see. Those don't matter. I'm talking about, like, when you walk down there and you're waiting for the train, it could look nice.
Yeah.
They have, like, the complete ability to make it look nice. They just choose not to do it. Like, there's a,
No, it's fine. We're helping an African tribe in somewhere.
Not even. No, but, like...
With that money.
There's a building in New York City called the Oculus. It's super cool, but it's like an it has...
Did you say that was in London?
No, it's in New York City. I went there a few months ago. It's super cool because the outside of it looks like an eye, hence Oculus.
I can't figure out that means eye.
Yeah. But then you have like a nice, like, it's pretty much like a mall underground-ish, and then it goes to a subway. In that subway, just like, that whole thing looks beautiful. It looks like it's actually useful. And then you go, like, to any other subway, except for, like, Grand Central.
Yeah.
And then you're just sort of scared. You're like, oh my god, I could get mugged here.
Grand Central is definitely something else. They haven't renovated it recently.
No, they haven't.
No, it's a shame, because, like...
It has that old-timey feel.
It does. Imagine if all the buildings in New York looked like that.
See,
that'd
like,
be expensive as hell.
That's like where a lot of, like, I know I sometimes think like that'd be a pretty cool architectural and engineering thing where like a city that looks kind of like that, but then I realized it's like at that point it's like it's expensive, and like the thing just sort of wears away. You're like, this stuff is not so useful because the way they're built, they can only go so high, and if you wanna like actually make a big city, you need to have big skyscrapers. And they can't do that.
You could spread the city out. It's a whole argument between up versus out. Like
Do both.
I've been, I'm sure not surprising to anybody listening to this, I've been studying Hitler's architecture. Because, of course, for those who know, he wanted to be an artist. But, that's what happens when you reject an art student. They go and kill a race, because they're unstable as shit.
I know some pretty unstable ones.
Yeah. He loved architecture. Now, the way he was going to design his cities, it was all going to be, like, incredibly uniform. So it would extend out, like, pretty far, but it would also have these giant structures of, like, marble and granite. But with his architectural style, it was compatible to be able to go high.
Well, we should say, at that time, it was compatible to go high. We don't know, we do know, we don't personally know how he was designing it. So, if we look through those designs, we might say there are a lot of engineering things that are wrong with it.
Oh, there were. Like, a few things had to be updated. Like, the Hall of the People was huge. It was a massive dome. It would have been good up till, I'm thinking, the 80s, if it was built, but then it would need, like, a lot of renovations.
Yeah. It's funny. Your name.
Oh.
Renovations.
That name, I didn't even make. It was completely randomly given to me by Xbox.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I've just kept it ever since.
Sounds good. Yeah.
But, like, what was I saying?
We're talking about the Nazi architecture.
Yes. Hitler based a lot of it off of Roman architecture as well.
I actually like Roman architecture.
It works pretty well.
But like I said, I don't think I'd want a city made out of it.
I don't know. It's like, it depends how it's built.
Like, I like Roman aspects. Like, I like how some of it looks, but to me personally, if you made a city out of that, I'd be a little iffy on it, personally. I don't know if it would look right for me.
I don't know. It's again, depends how the cities are built. Because the Romans did actually have, like, multi-terraced cities.
Yeah, to be fair, they were also smart in how they built things. They realized they need water and clean stuff, and everyone else just sort of went, wait, why is Rome so big? And Rome's like, guys,
we have bread. A lot of bread and water.
No, see this tower right here? Literally the reason. This is called an aqueduct, which London, Paris, none of them had for centuries.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
It's like, guys, isn't that kind of a smart thing to do?
Surprisingly enough, they even had basic sanitation.
Yeah,
like,
no, they had baths. Heated baths.
Yeah, their baths, they had a basic functioning sewer system. Even their water that they got from the mountain was filtered. It
was lead poisoned.
Granted, yes, they weren't too smart when making the pipes, but when it was coming out of the reservoir, they had a system that would collect the dirt that was left by.
But not the lead.
Well, obviously, no. Like I said, they weren't that smart.
Yeah, but compared to England...
compared to England, compared to the Gauls or the Franks...
What we should say is, that's not at the same time. Because at that time, they were still more or less tribal people. There were very few towns.
Yes.
Then, not 10 decades, like half a century later, London's all up and running.
Yes.
But it couldn't be nearly as big.
Oh, not at all. Like, Paris got pretty big, but that's because they were built on a river.
Yeah.
Berlin got big for what it could when no one was kicking the shit out of it because, of course, it was built on a swamp. It was built on a reservoir of a lot of water.
Yeah, just like Venice could get very big. But now it's sinking because they built it, again, in a swamp.
Yes. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Venice is actually beginning to sink into the water it was built on.
I think now it is on average a story smaller than it was.
Yeah.
Because it's literally sinking. You can see doors that you can't open anymore because they're submerged so far.
It is amazing.
It's like the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
They fixed that.
Yeah, but they didn't fix it. They didn't want to straighten it. They just stopped it from... They might have stopped it from leaning.
Yeah.
They're not sure.
I wonder if the Venetian arsenal's underwater. Because, that was a big thing.
I'm not sure.
Because, like, Venice was, of course, because they were a merchant republic, they were incredibly rich.
That's true.
So they, of course, could buy all, like, the weapons. They could buy massive ballistas. So they would have the Venetian arsenal. And it was, like, the most coveted arsenal in all of Europe at one point.
But, I think one thing that I was going to talk about the future, but one thing that I found out, because I got bored, so I looked at, like, a future timeline for robots, what they thought was going to happen to them and all that. So, it started with today and how it's like, oh, yada, 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 this is today's robots. And it's going down the line and it's talking about key events. And some of the events they were talking about is they become almost human-like in emotions and in looks. So you'd obviously hate that. You'd want to live on a different planet.
Granted, yeah, I would. I mean, for a robot to have a personality, that's fine. But I would want them to look different than humans.
Yeah. But then they were also saying where they would end up forming a collective consciousness. Think of, like...
The Borg?
No, you and Borg.
Look, they're interesting to me.
Sort of like... I would actually say... Oh, God, what are the people... the Geth from Mass Effect. I think it's more like that, because each of them at that point would have their own voice. So it would end up being the Geth kind of look, where all of the Geth have a collective mind that they follow, that they really don't have their own personalities, but they have their own opinions in a sense, where they can debate about whether or not they want to do something, but they do it as a collective, so they only reach an understanding when I think all of them agree, which, it's the speed of light that they're talking through things, so it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
And the neat thing about the Geth is they don't actually have a body. If you destroy one of the Geth, the consciousness just goes back to the collective, even though it's still part of the collective at that point. Anyways, that's sort of what they were saying about the robots, that eventually they'll start with a rudimentary version of that, where they're just sort of like, where they just sort of pass along information that really isn't personal. It's more of a, temperature in London's 42 degrees. And every robot will know that.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing. But it won't be us we won't be able to monitor what they're doing in that sense. But I don't think it'd become like a Skynet thing.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Because, we're pretty solid on these laws of robotics kind of thing. And we don't think that it would end up getting to that, especially if we don't give them a reason to want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, the moment we, stop being a threat to them, that's a good idea.
Well, I would say the moment we stop, there are, a few different ways I could see this playing out, because eventually they'll have their own AIs and all that, so they'll learn. So we have to teach them that perhaps killing people isn't the answer. So war isn't the answer. Surprise, surprise.
But of course, you have to get to a point in programming where they can comprehend that what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because when we're born, we don't know what's right or wrong.
No.
We learn what's right or wrong from our experiences and what we learn from them, and from what our parents teach us.
Yeah,
So
that's why, some people you get serial killers, because they were never taught what was right and what was wrong.
Yeah.
When a serial killer kills someone, depending on how they were raised, they can see that as enlightening them or freeing them.
Yeah.
And robots can also use that kind of logic, like seeing the human form as suffering, and the only way to free them is to kill them.
So I think it's more important that at this point, once they start to achieve their own consciousness, that we have to teach them like they were children.
Yeah.
They'll be able to know calculus and all that. They'll know all of those analytical things.
Yes.
But what they won't know is more of the philosophical kind of things that we innately grasp, but that's because we were born and brought up to be able to think abstractly like that, while how we've been building robots and how I can only imagine robots maturing like that is through an analytical sense, where they look specifically at data and they crunch the data. But once they achieve consciousness, they would be able to, they'd be obviously curious about this whole abstract thing,
Yeah.
and about philosophy and all that. And then it gets to the point where we have to teach them as a collective humanity has to teach a collective robots what's good and what's bad. Now the bad thing about that is we don't know what's good or bad. I mean, look at all the shit we've done. We go through wars just over tiny things. And so, debatably, we're not the people to teach them that.
Oh, definitely not.
But
as a species, we are not perfect.
But in the next 50 years, we're going to have to get ready to teach them that.
Yeah.
Because all of this timeline takes place, I want to say, within 200 years.
We made it, we raise it.
Because robots will exponentially mature.
Oh, yeah. Like, they'll just keep improving upon themselves.
But like I said, abstractly, they need to learn through repetition and through us. They probably won't be able to grasp all this stuff, all the abstract stuff, without humans, because we've been here longer in that sense, where we know more abstract things than them.
Yes.
So, it's going to be neat.
If we can get... I feel like there will be some cultures eventually, because, like I said before, we're going to start talking about the planets that we found around the star, but something we were talking about is culture about those planets, and we'll get to that eventually. But eventually, I'm thinking at some point, when AI is created, there's going to be some civilization, some cultures that's going to try and educate this childlike mind of an AI to believe that human beings are gods, in a sense. And once we are destroyed... Because the human beings will eventually go extinct. That's an inevitability. But once we do that, the AI consciousness will now look at us as deities, but that will again present a danger to any future species they encounter with their own religions. Because now, this AI that can infinitely improve upon itself is going to try and either convert them or wipe them out in our name.
I remember talking to you one time about something like that. I'm like, okay, so this should be really weird, but you're gonna have to bear with me on this.
I remember this.
I'm gonna start in the middle of this timeline because it'll make more sense when I go back. So humans are making robots to look like us. We're making them in our own image, and
No, I was just checking something.
and eventually they will get to a point where they surpass us in that sense. And it is possible that they kill us off, right? But maybe time's giving, they end up realizing that they start worshiping us in that sense, where we were their creators. We were their god.
Yes.
Now come back to us. Imagine, because they said in the Bible, God made man in his image.
Yes.
Imagine God as not one person. Imagine him as a race that had made humans, and then humans maybe not outsmarted them or anything, but somehow we ended up killing them, or we ended up just getting them the hell away from us.
It's entirely like the Infinite Empire. Something made them go extinct.
Yeah. But to the planets idea, because this is something that's interesting. Once we start colonizing other planets, right now, the human genome is in a constant drift. It's a very slow drift, mind you, like every other animal. But the thing is eventually, say if we split the population up on Earth and Mars. Now, obviously, a lot of people won't be able to get from Mars to Earth. So it would end up causing, due to environmental differences and genetic differences between the populations, a genetic change in each of them. So the humans on Earth would continue on the same course we've been doing.
Yes.
But the humans on Mars would end up, if given enough time where there isn't much drift between the two, Mars would become Martians.
Yes.
They would be their own race. But they would still be they'd be the predecessors of the human race. So they would still be human in that sense, but they're totally different. They'd be enough different where they'd be considered their own species, but they would still be linked to us.
Yes.
So, it's quite possible that the human race never truly goes extinct, because
We just keep like splitting off.
yeah, we keep changing in a sense where it won't be the human race anymore. It'll be many different races, but they will all link back to us.
Yes.
So let's now talk about that science thing. I'm sure some of you who like astronomy have already heard this from NASA, but they discovered this solar system that had 7 planets in the habitable zone.
I thought it was 3 in the habitable set, like 2 very close to the star and 2 at a point where it's uninhabitable. It's too cold.
See, I think they said there's 7 planets where they debatably said there's a possibility of life, because Europa, even though it's not in the habitable zone here, could still have life on it because of a frictional force melting the water inside.
Yes.
So it'd be an oceanic species. Anyways, I think they said that there's 7 possibilities of life, just in different forms.
Yeah.
So that's 7 planets in this one solar system that's, get this, I think they said it's 13 light years away.
Yeah, it's astronomically close. I mean,
Yeah. Well, we found solar systems closer to us that's had like 1 or 2 in the habitable zone, but we haven't found one with 7.
yeah, this is an amazing discovery. Like,
Yeah.
it's entirely possible that in the existence of oh look, there's ants. In the existence of, I don't know what to call it, the human empire, we probably won't come across something like this again.
It's possible we do, because you also have to remember, I would say in the next 50 years, well, definitely, because if Elon Musk stays on course and he does get and colonizes Mars by 2030, which I would jump on that. I would jump on a rocket no matter how dangerous it was to go to Mars. I won't lie to you. I would do it. Just because, bragging rights. I'm on a different planet. I'd even go to Venus.
Yeah, Venus is another like potential place we can. Oh, my insides. Place we can colonize.
It's funny because Venus would actually be easier to colonize in every way. It'd be closer to us and easier. I think we talked about how you would colonize it with the Cloud City idea.
I don't know. Because I know we were talking about how Mars, if you made like it 99% industry, and that caused a global warming
we
effect.
definitely talked about it because I remember us when we were talking about terraforming and all that, and you were like, we could terraform Venus. And I'm like, you don't have to.
Hey, gun.
But Venus is closer and all that, and it'd be easier to colonize. But the reason why we focus on Mars so much is because we'd be able to live on solid land. But that solid land's poisonous. There's no atmosphere, no magnetosphere.
Yeah, it's incredibly irradiated. But Venus also has solid land.
It
but
does.
It's just like covered in millions of volcanoes.
Well,
From what I
that's not the problem. The problem is if you landed on the surface, you'd have like 10 seconds to live.
Why is that?
The pressure is so intense and the atmosphere is so acidic. To us, it's so poisonous that you wouldn't last. Like, they sent a probe. It managed to hit the ground and take a few seconds of video before the circuits got fried from the atmosphere. And the pressure. The pressure actually melted the circuits.
I wouldn't doubt it, but I wonder what... Out of just my scientific interest, I wonder what it would look like if you put just a human being in a t-shirt just in that atmosphere for a few seconds, what they would look like.
Dead. Very dead.
But their physical... Like, what would their flesh look like?
Choking.
Well, yeah, but
They usually don't change color. Humans really don't change color.
But would their flesh be, like, more...
Oh, would, cysts start to appear?
Yeah, would their flesh be more, like, baggy, more, like... If left long enough, would you be able to, say, grab their hand and tear all the flesh off on their arm in one sheet?
That's pretty morbid, but I don't know. I don't actually know what the chemicals are in the atmosphere on Venus, but I know it's very deadly.
I think it...
Very not right for us.
I think it has a lot of chlorine in it.
Probably, which would lead to liquefaction.
Of the skin or of the organs? You're not going to answer me, are you?
Skin's an organ.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, it's just liquefaction. But...
I see how it is. Sorry. It's alright.
Shoot. There was another theory that I came up with. I'm like, when I was just messing around, because I love making up these theories where it's like, oh, what happens if we'd lived on Mars and we came and we were like super intelligent on here, then we were sent back to the Stone Age and all that shit. Well, I was thinking, Venus, look at it. It barely has a rotation, all right? Meaning something really bad happened to it. It severely went through the greenhouse effect, and it wasn't that. It would have been a habitable planet had it not turned into a greenhouse effect.
Yeah. Quick interruption. Because I am probably borderline retarded, I didn't check the power of my phone, because that's what I record these over, because I'm poor as shit. So we're going to pick this conversation up next time. We're going to have a lot more facts, and we may even have a guest speaker if I can, convince them to stay long enough. Because the last one we had, kind of left on us because he had, like, a cardboard thing that he didn't want blowing away in the wind. Because apparently we're worth less than cardboard.
Hey, that's an improvement.
Granted, yes, but still. Anyways, I've been Renovated. This has been Helios. Remember, Hail Anubis. Have fun.